I would like to express regrets from Deputy Mayor Fancy, who was unable to be with us this evening. Are there any changes to the agenda? Any changes to agenda? If not, I'll ask for approval of the agenda, moved by Councillor Charlton, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favor? There are no presentations this evening. Are there any petitions to table? If not, I'll call for public question comment session. For those who are here, unlike the public hearing, which has unlimited amount of time in which to speak, during our regular council meeting, comments are regulated to 5 minutes. You recognize by myself and then approach the mic, identify yourself by name and civic address. Is there anyone who wishes to speak?
Hello. Good evening, Mayor Norman, Council, and Region staff. My name is Susan McGibbon. I live at 127 Main Street in Liverpool, Nova Scotia. I moved to Nova Scotia in 2021, just for quick context, with my partner who grew up here, having visited here for 35 years in the summers. And we continue to live part of the year in Ontario, and I'm just giving you that context for something I'm going to talk to you about in the township of Georgian Bay. Professionally, I've worked most of my career as a senior marketing executive with a lot of background in strategy and research. But more importantly tonight, I'm here in my role as a library board chair in a second term for the township of Georgian Bay in Ontario. And I sit also as a director on the board of FOPL, which is the Federation of Ontario Public Libraries, which is a library advocacy group representing 365 branches in Ontario. So why am I here tonight? A couple of reasons. I'm a lifelong library user. I think they're one of the most incredible tools in society today and only getting stronger. And as a chair of a library board, I'm really excited that this region is going to have a new library facility to serve this community, and it's desperately needed, in my opinion. But I'm personally a little bit concerned about the process in which some of the decisions are being made regarding it. I'm not here to be critical. I'm really here to give you an experienced point of view and offer you some food for thought, because I know you have a decision to make tonight. I just want to talk to you very quickly about some of my experience in the township of Georgian Bay, because I think there's some nice coordination. We serve a population of about 19,000 residents, and they're spread out over a large geographical area in southern Georgian Bay, so not too much different from the region if we go from end to end to end. We have 3 distinct communities in the township of Georgian Bay: McTier, Port Severn, and Honey Harbour. And we have, in the last number of years, experienced some of the largest population growth based on the Census Canada 2021 data. And we have this enormous influx of people from the Greater Toronto area moving north, and that started obviously through COVID. So we all of a sudden had our population grow from 14,000 to 19,000 over the course of 6 years. So as a library board, we decided to take the step to really figure out how do we need to better serve our residents going forward. So we kind of embarked on a mission to figure that out. And one of the most important things we did is that we made our decisions and our plans based on having data. We didn't have any data when we started. So we took a lot of time and conducted town halls through all of our 3 communities, which isn't easy. Some people live out on islands in Georgian Bay. Everyone has to come by boat. But we used our local schools and had town halls in the 3 locations of our branches. We had a very in-depth online survey. So we have 19,000 residents, and over that period of 3 months, we had 2,000 participants telling us what they wanted their library to be in the future and where they wanted the branches to be. And this is what they told us. They wanted us to be a welcoming, accessible, inclusive community hub, very important words, which bring people together, be a place for lifelong learning for all ages and all citizens, contribute to the community's cultural, economic, educational, health, recreational, and social well-being, and provide free is a really important word with libraries, even though I know you're funding them, but it's an important word for the community. Free access to a world of ideas, information, and inspiration. So one of the key things that we learned and where we've been successful is where we decided to have the branches. So the communities that we are in have limited services. There's basically a grocery store, potentially a liquor store. There's some hospitality services and a marina. None of our communities have a recreation center, a sports complex, a hockey rink, or a senior center. None of them. So being located in the core of these three communities was the big learning we had. We needed to be downtown, even though downtown's very tiny, kind of like a Liverpool. Being beside the grocery store, being beside the home hardware, or beside the school or a marina became key to get all of these 19,000 residents using our libraries and for us to be able to deliver services properly. And now, 6 years later, we're thriving. I'm really thrilled to say, and our township is thrilled. And just as a quick example, back to the fact that all of those other services did not exist in our community. This past year, we do advanced care planning for seniors at our libraries. We distribute and train everyone on food cyclers, which are small composting tools. We write all the resumes for the young people coming out of high school. We are the food bank distribution centers. We now have recreation, a whole recreation library in all of our branches. So this summer, as an example, kids could come and borrow fishing rods, right? So tuned to the community. And we do all the technology training for all the students in the area. And the feedback we've had is that we are now viewed in these three communities as the community hub. So we're really, really proud of that. The thought for me is, going forward, if you just take that as a microcosm of another library system, similar types of differing communities, but a need for community hubs. How can you best, as a council, serve the community going forward? So I spent a bit of time looking at the strategic plan for the South Shore Public Libraries Board. In my point of view, that plan that they have was put together by collecting data for their boards, partners, stakeholders, and importantly, users. So I think going forward, I believe you need more data than what you have. You need this process of where this library goes and what it's going to be much more inclusive and collaborative. You need to consult the people. You need some more town halls, you need more surveys, you need more conversations to happen. And I'm hearing it everywhere. Please broadly across the community, talk to people. Find out what they need and decide and design the library based on those needs. And the second thing is, coming out of that, please think twice about the location. Your South Shore Public Library vision is to be the vital center of all of our communities. That location over there is not the vital center of this community. Think about Bridgewater. It's a perfect example. There's a library, there's a rink, there's an aquatic center, there's a recreation center, there's a cafe, and it's all in one place. You have won the lottery of library locations over by the Amera Center and where the new Queen's Manor will be. It is accessible, it's walkable, it's bikeable, it's convenient. And I think you really need to take a second look at that location. This is, I think, one of the most significant initiatives this region will undertake for the citizens of this community. Please take the time to rethink it, to listen to your constituents, and build what they need and build where they want it to be. And I'm here to help if I can.
Thank you, Ms. McGibbons. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak? Name, civic number. Ms. McGibbons ran over her 5 minutes slightly, but I remind people to please stay. I don't like to interrupt people, but please try to stay within that 5-minute time slot.
Got it. My name is Laura Mathot, and I live at 85 High Point Terrace. Excuse me, I'm Malaga North. And as a vice president of the Greater Malaga North Landowners Association, I'm pleased to be here to speak in support of one of the items on tonight's agenda, the road levy bylaw update. The Greater Malaga Lot Owners Association, that's a mouthful, is an incorporated nonprofit organization chartered in the province of Nova Scotia in February 1977. The association represents the largest recreational land development in the Atlantic provinces, covering approximately 3,000 acres on the shores of Pond Hook, Maliga, Beaver Dam, Annis, Hidden Beavertail, and Black Rattle Lakes. The association represents 1,200 lot owners. We maintain 52 kilometers of roads, 3 bridges, and 13 boat launches. We provide winter clearing to ensure full-time access for all of our developed properties, and our board is made up of volunteers who work for the benefits of our members and the community. Many municipalities, such as Lunenburg County and Halifax Regional Municipality, offer the opportunity for road ownership associations to engage them to levy annual road association dues as part of the annual property tax bill. In these arrangements, the Road Ownership Association receives the dues from the region or municipality and delivers the services to members with a stable revenue base. In 2022, we began discussions with the region of Queens on the potential for such a bylaw. And as a volunteer board, we're proud of what we do, yet we struggle to keep up with the growth and changes in the number of properties, the administration fees for such a large number of lot owners, and collection of the fees from all who benefit from the services we provide. Since that time, in our 2022 and 2023 AGMs, we've told our members about our progress and our intention to adopt such a bylaw should it be created by the region. We asked our members to cast their votes and are pleased to say that in both AGMs, we received unanimous support in the matter. We're here in support of Council voting to proceed towards the creation of this bylaw. Such a mechanism will provide exceptional benefit to all of our members and potentially other road associations in the region. Our area has become the largest tax base in the region of Queens, growing 3 times faster than any other in the region. We're proud of what we do. We're proud of our area. And council and staff, we're asking your assistance. Your assistance will help us deliver services to this growing tax base and support the continued growth of the beautiful region of Queens. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If not, I will call for approval of the regular council November 14th, moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Hawks. All those in favor? Passed. 7.1 recommendation, dangerous and unsightly. I would ask that Special Constable Jason Hartung and Special Constable Kelly Ann Hurley come forward. There is a motion within the package. Councillor Hawks?
Yes. I move that the Regional Queens Municipal Council declares the property located at 66 Martin Road, Harmony Mills, Queens County, Nova Scotia, and identified as 70157508 as dangerous and or unsightly as defined by the Municipal Government Act of Nova Scotia, and that the Regional Queens Council cause an order to be served upon the estate of Lawrence C. Song, located at 66 Martin Road, Harmony Mills, Queens County, Nova Scotia, requiring that within 30 days of the date of the service of the order, the following work to be carried out. The full cleanup of construction and demolition materials and transport to the Region of Queens landfill facility and leveling of the property accordingly. 2. Clean up of miscellaneous items strewn about the property, including plastic, metal, shingles, glass, etc. 3. Formal posting of civic number 66 for fire, police, and ambulance response. And 4. Proper remediation of any well or septic remaining. And that the estate of Lawrence C. Song fails to comply with the order, the administrator may cause the requirements of the order to be carried out and all expenses incurred by the Regional Queens Municipality become the responsibility of the parties of interest.
And that's seconded by Councillor Brown. Thank you for circulating the pictures. I believe they've been circulated to all the council. Yes? You've received the photos? Yes.
Mayor, councillors, thank you. Yeah, so we are here in regards to a dangerous and unsightly premise with a possible threat to public safety at 66 Martin Road, Harmony Mills in Queens County. The property owner, state of, is Lawrence C. Zong, and the person in charge thereof would be Jacob Zong, which I believe is the grandson. The PID number is 701-57508, and the assessment number is 050-54729. So in regards to 66 Martin Road, it hosted a dwelling that over the last few years deteriorated to collapse, a full collapse, and kind of been down into the foundation basement. Jacob Zong presently resides in a recreation vehicle on the offending property and has no way of cleaning up the construction and demolition materials himself and properly disposing of the same via transport to the RQM landfill facility. Zong fully understands the process leading to a full cleanup of the dangerous and unsightly property, which poses a threat to public safety. So our recommendations for full cleanup are as follows with number 1, the full cleanup of construction and demolition materials and transport to the Region of Queens landfill facility and the leveling of the property accordingly. And number 2, clean up of miscellaneous items thrown about the property, including plastics, metals, shingles, and glass. And 3, a formal posting of the civic number 66 so that fire, police, and ambulances can respond accordingly. And lastly, number 4, proper remediation of any well or septic remaining. So I do believe there is a well, possibly somewhere underneath the debris that's uncapped. These items must be actioned and resolved as soon as possible.
Thank you, Special Constable Hartung. Are there questions? Councillor Gidney.
So we've been going back and forth with them regularly since August, I believe it is. Yeah, in August we started. We've been trying to give them lots of warning, lots of meetings, phone calls as well. It's just unfortunately because of the state of the property and the dangerous aspect to it. That's why we've moved a little bit faster than normal. It's just not safe.
Other comments? Councillor Brown?
Has there been any kind of progress from the land owner? Like to have they done anything to move this forward?
So unfortunately, there's been zero progress from the time I first visited in August to beginning of August till now. I think all that's really happened is he's added 2 appliances to the pile. But beyond that, there's been nothing. And we've made several recommendations of what he could be doing with a large pile of clean wood, but it doesn't seem to want to interest him.
Any other comments? Hearing none, there is a motion on the floor. I'm going to call for the motion. All those in favor of the motion as read? Contrary? Unanimous. Ms. Serrata, Community Development Coordinator. Number 7.2. There is a recommendation. Councillor Hawks, I believe this is within your district.
I move that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality provide the grant funding to the Pleasant River Community Hall Society in the amount of $2,305 from the 2023-2024 Community Investment Fund.
Seconded by Councillor Brown. So, Ms. Serrata, for those in our viewing audience who do not have the package, would you just give a brief explanation, please?
Yes, absolutely. The Pleasant River Community Hall Society is looking to replace a section of the asphalt roof shingles on the east side of their building. The request is in full compliance with our Community Investment Fund policies, and it is towards a capital investment of upgrading part of an existing infrastructure. One of the things that's peril about this is the time sensitivity of this request. Given yesterday's rains, I shudder to see what kind of damage has been done today, and I've been trying to reach them actually. The hope is to get the work done right away while there is contractor availability to prevent further loss of revenue from damage and cancellations of their programming. It's a small community with a very active, vibrant participant following with this particular hall. And right now they have to be very mindful of what they can book because it's weather dependent. Right now there's a lot of things that they're getting requests for that they just can't rely on because they don't know what's going to happen. There's quite a bit of leaking. And the hope is that they can start to guarantee a safe and dry place to continue their operations.
Are there any questions of council? Councillor Gidney?
Not a question. Not a question. Not a question, but it's just observation. It qualifies under the capital investment fund. It's well needed. They meet all the criteria, so I don't see a problem with this at all. I support this 100%. Thank you.
Any other questions before I call for the comment? Councillor Hawks?
Yeah, I went down actually and looked at this, and they really do need this, and they're a small community, and they work hard to keep what they got, and we don't want to lose any more of them. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. They're very needy.
I believe Councillor Hawks, we had a council
We
meeting
did have
there.
a
One of
council
her
meeting.
traveling council meetings were there.
That's right.
So just a reminder to people, that's the hall. So if no further questions, I'm going to, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, that this is one of the great things about this community investment fund is that it helps us to keep these small communities and it helps us to keep that feeling of community there so that people have a place to meet and they come together and this is small help to keep them safe and meeting. So I think it's great.
I'm going to call for the question now. All those in favor? Contrary? Unanimous. 7.3 deals with the development agreement for the new fixed overnight accommodation. Director McLeod will come back to the table, and there is a recommendation in the package. Councillor Hawks?
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality adopt an administrative policy respecting entering into a development agreement with Jasmine and Matthew Mallet to allow for the establishment of an 8-unit fixed roof overnight accommodation on their property identified as PID 70191937 and located on Highway 8 in South Brookfield.
That is seconded by Councillor Brown. Are there any councillors wish to add anything? I do have some new information, which I think, CEO Jodry, do you want to, this is very last minute, like 10 minutes before the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through you. I would suggest that council actually table this motion for now. We've received some information that just literally came in my mailbox a couple minutes before council meeting related to this development, not about the development in particular, but about some environmental matters related to species at risk. I think staff have a responsibility to do some due diligence on our part and to bring further information back to council before anything proceeds. That'd be my suggestion to council.
And I have spoken to the Malays who are present, so they understand that the species at risk is black ash. It's an endangered species. It could be on the property. So if it's on the property, then the Malays will adjust accordingly. But we just need to do a little bit of investigation. So I believe it is best. Councillor Hawks,
Now I'll move that we table this.
and it's been moved by Councillor Hawks and seconded by Councillor Brown that we table the motion. Any Councillor Charlton?
Thank you. I would agree that we should table the motion, and I think that there's a bigger discussion to be had at PAC on, are there any additional steps that need to be checked into before we end up here? So, thank you.
So a vote to table, all those in favor of tabling the motion, contrary? And we'll have staff investigate that and get back as quickly as possible. And then I do agree, Councillor Charlton, I think there needs to be a bigger discussion regarding all properties within Queens when it comes to making sure that we're doing our due diligence when it comes to the matters that we heard spoke of. 7.4 intervener status funding options. Would someone like to make the motion, Councillor Amaro?
I move the council authorize up to 120,000 plus HST to fund intervenor work related to Kelly Cove ARC application for Liverpool Bay from the unbudgeted expenditure being funded from special operating reserve or the
No, one or the other.
number one, or,
No, you don't make a motion of two.
oh, okay, from the existing 2023-2024 operating budget.
The motion's out of order. The intention of the motion is you either read one, the money's either coming from unbudgeted expenditure from the special operating reserve, or it's coming from the operating budget, one or the other.
The
So-
operating budget. Do you want me to read it again? Would you like me to?
Perhaps before we have a seconder, and this is perhaps Councillor Ms. Vino, would you explain the difference between the two funding options?
So the two funding options, one is from the Special Operating Reserve, which is the place where if any surpluses or deficits are placed at the end of the year. And the operating budget is the budget that's directly used against the tax rate. So if we fund, the council chooses to fund the intravenous status cost through the operating budget, it will become part of the surplus or deficit for the current operating year. If council should choose to fund that amount from the special operating reserve, it will not. It will just reduce the amount in the special operating reserve. You will see it on the financial statement coming in and going out. But the net effect on our surplus or deficit for this fiscal year will be zero if it's funded from the special operating reserve, and it will not be zero if it's funded from the operating budget. Does that make sense?
Councillor Miro, so basically the motion was written like that to give two choices. You either fund it from a reserve, which has no effect on our operating budget this year. We fund it from the operating budget, we could end up with a deficit or whatever. So back to you.
Okay, let's start over. So I move that council authorize up to 120,000 plus HST to fund intervenor work related to Kelly Cove's ARC application for Liverpool Bay from the unbudgeted expenditure being funded from the special operating reserve.
And that's seconded by Councillor Charlton. Discussion on the matter. Is there any, Councillor Amaro?
As we know, the last council committed a substantial amount to the branding, the Region of Queens to Queens Coast. Although it's not all of what Region of Queens is about, it is a substantial part. And I believe it will devastate our branding name. Queens Coast is about the coast, the beaches, Beach Meadows Beach, Somerville Beach, Carter's Beach. And I don't believe we need massive fish farms to ruin our pristine waters.
The size of the fish farm that's proposed, the existing one, is now 4 hectares, and they're proposing it to be 40 hectares in size. And the other two are going to be 40 hectares as well. The Brooklyn site one, and there's a Mersey Point site one. I think it's going to have a devastating impact on our Beach Meadows Beach. It's directly across from it, and we've been trying to beautify the beach, make it become accessible, and we've invested a lot of money in a new washroom facility down there, and I think it's going to destroy the aspect of the beach. Keep in mind there's another recreation facility, the Brooklyn Marina. You know, there's going to be a problem with access there as well, I believe, and our business, Mersey Seafoods, our big business in town. I think it's going to be affected as well. It's going to restrict the waterways coming in and out, and I am fully behind opposing this fish farm, and I'm fully behind hiring a lawyer and becoming an intervener for the application.
Other comments? Councillor Muse.
I think the recommendation is wrong here. Are we discussing where the money is going to come out of, or are we discussing to be an intervener? The way that the motion reads, it has nothing about us being an intervener. It's saying where the money is going to come from. So I think we have to have another recommendation to say if we're going to be an intervener.
CEO Cody.
Sorry.
That's, thank you, Councillor Muse. I think that's a good call on your part. For sure, we should make sure that, I mean, I guess it was sort of presumed, but you're right, we should actually absolutely have a motion. So we've been approved to be an intervener, but you're right, council has not sort of voted on that matter. So just maybe a friendly amendment to this motion to where you're going to fund it from and that we will be an intervener, I think would be really helpful direction to staff. So thanks.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think in the recommendation, it's council is authorizing the expenditure to fund intervenor work. I think that says right in the motion that how we're funding the intervenor, that we're doing it. So I think the motion is in order. My feeling.
As chair, the motion reads, Council authorize up to $100,000 plus HST to fund intervener work. Perhaps a slight amendment from a councillor that simply states to fund RQM's role as intervener is all that's required. Because we could be funding the marina's intervener work. So if someone would like to make that friendly amendment to fund RQM's intervener work, Councillor Charlton.
I can make that amendment. I move that council authorize up to $120,000 plus HST to fund Region of Queens Municipality's intervener work related to Kelly Cove's ARC application for Liverpool Bay from the unbudgeted expenditure being funded from Special Operating Reserve.
Friendly amendments usually don't need a seconder, but since you read the whole motion, I'll call for a seconder to the amended motion. Any discussion on the motion as amended? Any discussion on the motion as amended? Councillor Muse.
So we've been accepted as an intervener. So was some of the points that we put on the application Are we allowed to put anything else in afterwards, or do we have to just stick to what we have put in on the application?
We can find whatever expert witnesses we wish, and we do not have to only stick to what we've placed on the application. The intervenor process is very, the ARB, Agriculture Review Board, is very stringent on what interveners can do. Their witnesses must be experts. They cannot be our neighbors, ourselves, making common statements. They have to be proven, and they have to be expert. People can write to the ARB board with their commonalities. However, as a region of Queens, we must have expert witnesses, expert in their fields, who do not make suggestive comments, but make statements that are based upon fact. Hence the dollar amount. I'm optimistic we're not going to go near that dollar amount, but just in case. But just some background information. Any comments? Councillor Charlton?
Thank you. I share a lot of the same views as Councillor Amiro. This has caused a big concern in the area that I represent, and I was very happy that members of council supported the intervenor application. And I think it's really important for us to speak up and protect our bays the best we can for our residents. And I think at this point, with this expansion being proposed, I think it would be really irresponsible for us not to fight, because we have that option, you know, as a municipality to do so. So I will obviously be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Are there any other comments before I call for the question? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, like Vicky and Maddie have said, we're the Queen's Coast. We market ourselves as Queen's Coast. We want to bring people to Queen's Coast, and we don't want to market them as walking to a fish farm. If these go in, we'll lose 25% of the surface area of Liverpool Bay. We'll lose tourism opportunities. We'll lose recreation opportunities. There's no gains there. You know, Cook Aquaculture doesn't have a head office in Queens County. They hire very few people. They process outside of the county. They don't create a lot of jobs, but they can take away a lot of jobs by growing it like this. And I think that there's a huge downside. So I'm definitely in favor of intervenor status.
Any other comments before I call for the question? I'm going to call for the question. All those in, first we're back to I already called for the question on the amended motion, on the main motion as amended. Because we did the amended motion. Carried. Solid waste tipping fee waiving, there is a recommendation in your package, and you will recall this. We discussed this at our last meeting under discussion, so there is a recommendation. Councillor Gidney.
I recommend that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality waive tipping fees associated with disposal of demolition materials originating from 156 Wolf Street, Liverpool, up to 10 metric ton.
Seconded by Councillor Charlton. And do you want to recap, Ms. Vino, how we got to this point?
As you mentioned, Mayor Norman, this matter was discussed at our last council meeting. We have a dwelling on a property, PID 700705003, Edith Baker, who is unfortunately deceased, and the dwelling on the property has fallen into disrepair, must be demolished. Mr. and Mrs. Hatt, who have taken over responsibility for that property, have requested that council waive the tipping fees for the demolition materials that will be taken to our solid waste facility management site.
Any questions from council before I call the question? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, in Queens County, we're allowed to take 4 loads to the landfill a month, free of charge. So if the residents had gotten a family member or a friend with a truck and a trailer, they could have easily taken that 10 tons in 1 month free of charge. They own now 2 properties, so that gives them 8 loads a month. So, you know, it's well within what they could have done themselves free of charge, but this allows somebody who's doing the responsible thing to clean the property up. I mean, we had a motion earlier in the meeting, and we're gonna see what it's gonna cost us when it's not done responsibly. I think this is the best way to go.
All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. 7.6 was under discussion last council meeting as council had some questions. Councillor Muse, would you like to make the motion?
I move that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality reject all tenders for proposal number PW11-2023-2024, October 2023.
Seconded by Councillor Hawks. Director Grant?
Yes, thank you. So we were here 2 weeks ago, talking about this specific matter. So we put out a tender to replace our ultraviolet system at our South Queens plant. We received one submission that was significantly over budget. We're re-evaluating our tender process and looking to reject this one as a result.
Are there any questions of Director Grant? Councillor Brown?
Do you anticipate coming back fairly in the near future with a new, or sending out a new tender? I guess you won't be coming back to us, but you'll be going out with a new tender in the near future for this?
Yeah, so we've had staff working on it the last couple of weeks. We're probably first of the new year before we reissue. Looking at the equipment hopefully before the end of the fiscal year.
Any other questions? If not, I'll ask for the question. All those in favor? Contrary? Unanimous. Director Lane. Biodevelopment Opportunity Zone, 7.7. This comes with a recommendation. Councillor Brown?
I recommend that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality direct staff to utilize up to $5,000 from the existing budget to support and promote bio-based manufacturing investment opportunities.
Seconded by Councillor Charlton.
Thank you.
Director Lane.
I shall read through the background just for the benefit of people without an agenda package. So in December 2022, the Nova Scotia Innovation Hub engaged EcoStrat Inc. To produce a report and a regional investment risk rating to support efforts to attract new bio-based manufacturing industry investment to the area. The work would lead to the creation of a bioeconomy development zone, which would include the region of Queens. Council of the Region of Queens didn't provide funding to produce the report. However, the Nova Scotia Innovation Hub continued without that. An independent review committee was formed to provide input to the report from a wide range of forestry perspectives, including the Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, the Mi'kmaq Forestry Initiative, West Farm Management Inc., the Western Woodlot Services Cooperative Limited, the Medway Community Forest Cooperative, Harry Freeman and Sons Limited, Novon Forestry, as well as the Forestry Economic Task Force, Nova Scotia Innovation Hub, Invest Nova Scotia, and 4 municipal units. From the report, 4 sites were identified along the South Shore for their suitability for development, including Port Mersey Commercial Park and Freeman Lumber in Queens, along with Kaiser Meadow Industrial Park and the Bridgewater Business Park. The reporting result, is a very comprehensive, objective report on the state of the opportunity for investment attraction in forest-based industries in Queens, including a comprehensive review of 48 risk factors that could impact the viability of any development. The report and rating have been approved by the review committee, and the group is ready to launch the designation by a press release and subsequent direct marketing to the bioeconomy investor community. The group is now looking for a financial contribution from the municipal stakeholders to promote their region to global investors with a focus on these investment opportunities. As part of Council's approved 2023-24 budget, $5,000 was included for investment attraction work.
And CEO Jodrey has some comments.
Thank you, and I apologize to council. I know this broke our normal process where it goes on discussion and then a recommendation, but we thought it was a time-sensitive matter, so I hope council begs our indulgence in skipping the process a little bit. We just thought you might want to see this and make a decision on it before there's wider information out there about it. Yeah.
Questions or comments to Director Lane? Any questions or comments before I call the question? It's approved. It was in with monies within the director's budget that we've approved. So on that note, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary? Unanimous. I'm going to ask council's opinion. It is 7:12, so we've been meeting for about an hour and 12. We have 8 items left to go. Do you wish to work through a few more and then take a break? Or do you wish to take a break now and then work straight through the remainder? Councillor Gidney? You want, okay, so I will recess this for 10 minutes. Enough to stretch your legs, to drink water. Thank you. If everyone would take their chairs, please. Eight point one, council implementation report. Are there any questions about anything on that report? Nope. Financial review quarter two. Ms. Vino, Director of Corporate Services. So this is discussion only. There's no motions attached. Motions come throughout the end of the year with our audit reports and things. It's just a quarterly update on our expenditures and our revenues and how we're doing. So, Ms. Vino?
Thank you, Mayor Norman. So, as always, you should have two reports in front of you. You should have the discussion, and then you should have the financial. So I work through them both simultaneously, so it's easier for everyone to follow. So we're going to start with revenue, as we always do, Section 1 taxes. And I'm not going to go through everything line by line. I'm just going to touch on some highlights, and I'll stop at the end of the revenues, and you can ask any questions you might have and do the same thing at the end of the expenses. D-transfer tax budget was set at $720,000 for the year, and as of September 30th, we've received $693,184. While there were fewer sale transactions than previous years, there were several larger transactions in North Queens, and sales in Port Midway exceeded $1.2 million per purchase. Queens Home of Special Care Society land purchase also contributed to this increase. Nova Scotia Power Corporation actual is higher than budget. This is set by the province, and we do not know what the increase will be when we create the budget. Just for information of council, the deed transfer tax is one of the things that is very hard to predict, but what we're going to do this year in the February Audit and Internal Control Committee is we're going to take that number to the Audit and Internal Control Committee and talk to them, because we've got some really great people on that committee, about how we came about the number and get their feedback on it if they think that we're being too conservative or too optimistic. So it's one of those numbers that we're going to ask for their advice on. Section 2 is grants in lieu of taxes. Grants in lieu for Crown Timberlands and the remainder of the fire protection grant will not be received until January, February 2024, and that's typical. Section 4, protective services are monies collected from parking meters. Tax certificates are higher than expected, but corresponds to the higher than expected market activity. Section 5, revenue from other sources, building and development permits higher than budgeted. Return on investments have exceeded the budgeted amount. This is due to the interest rate continuing to increase and full utilization of our investment policy. Note that as operating cash is utilized throughout the year, interest revenue growth will decrease. So growth in interest revenue will not be consistent over the year, because it's only the investment in interest on the operating cash that goes against the operating budget. When I invest money that was put aside in a reserve for the post-closure, for example, that money goes to the post-closure reserve, okay? Excuse me. And I would just like to say that every report that I've been receiving from the banks that I deal with have told me that interest rates are going to start leveling out and decreasing. So I think we've reached a peak, but we'll still, obviously, staff will do the best they can to make sure we get the best return that we can. Included in miscellaneous revenue is an unsightly claim, moved from being posted as an expense to forming a lien on the property, thus no longer being an expense to the region. but to the assessed owner. Also included is Efficiency Nova Scotia funding for Queen's Place, FOID POP requests, and copier revenue from the library. So now I'm at section 7. Conditional transfers, that's when the government, provincial or federal, gives us money, but we're very restricted on what we can do. So it's for a special project. So the Recreation Nova Scotia equipment loan support of $6,862 for an adapted trike that lives at Queen's Place, which can be borrowed by the public, is the amount that you'll see there in section 7, part of that amount. Section 8, other transfers include, these are some big numbers, so that's why I wanted to make sure that they stuck out for you. Other transfers, this is transfers in, include $763,008 brought into operations from deferred revenue. If you remember at the end of last budget year, like literally March 31st, we received that amount of money from the government from their Sustained Services Growth Fund, and council decided to put it towards the Waterloo project, and it was part of that financing for phase 2 of Waterloo. And so that's what, as we incur those expenses, I bring it out of deferred revenue and put it into operating. And you'll see it come out of operating in section 16 because it's capital out of operating. It comes in and then it goes out because you can't net in public accounting. Proceeds from the sale of the land that the Queen's Care Society paid is also here with a corresponding transfer to the Special Capital Fund in section 16. So proceeds from land sales go to the Special Capital Fund, and that is part of the financial reporting and accounting practices of the province. Does anyone have any questions on our revenue side? Okay. So moving on to expenditures, we have our section 9, travel. Travel's council related is all mileage expense for meetings claimed by councillors. Financial management. Billings from Grant Thornton for work on the 22-23 audit. Extra work had to be completed this year for the new asset retirement obligation reporting standards. The costs posted here represent the overage from last year's accrual from audit fees. There was an extra one-time charge for management of the new asset retirement obligation section of the financials. An extra charge that will be reoccurring for additional audit testing around the IT systems of $4,000 a year. An extra time charge to assist staff with finalizing the statement after the ARO had been audited and finalized. So that one time was $10,000 added to our price. We went out to RFP, it was $21,500 if memory serves. So they charged an extra $10,000 one time for all the work they did to look at all the asset retirement obligation work that we did. There's also new auditing standard that was brought in to look at all of our IT. And our IT manager worked very closely with them on that. Most of that was surrounding SAP, which was provincial, but we still had to do some work here, and they had to do work with the province, and that was $4,000. That will be repeating. And as for the other charge for helping staff, my hope is that that won't be repeating, because it was our first year, and yes, there was absolutely a steep learning curve. So my hope is that that won't be repeated. Taxation. Reduced taxes is our low income tax exemption. By implementing the tiered system, more residents have taken advantage of this rebate. Tax sale costs were recovered in October when the tax sale was held. Again, this is for the first 2 quarters, so it's the end of September. Other includes a $21,000 bill for legal services, $16,600 for asset retirement obligation projects. That was for AECOM. That was the last report from them. CAO search and recruiting, and $20,000 for an evaluation for lift station capacity, and that was budgeted. Other general government services are our QM scholarships, and the $38,000 we paid to Queens County Transit, also all budgeted. Section 10, next page, protective services. Firefighting force is more than 50% because the grants aren't paid out equally over each quarter. They're paid 50 and then installments of 20. Fire station building expense includes over $80,000 for repairs and maintenance. This consists of new radiators which were carried forward from last year's budget and included in this year's budget, and the insurance claim deductible for water damage to the floor and unplanned maintenance due to the failure of the water lateral in the building. So that was a considerably unbudgeted cost for us. Section 11. Transportation services. Small tools and equipment include the upgrade of a scan tool which had surpassed its useful life, and safety equipment purchased for engineering and public works staff. Works garage renovations total $101,000, which include electrical, insulating, heating, washroom, office furniture, and making use of space for offices to accommodate the new positions approved by council. The amount budgeted was $73,000, so that overage is almost 40%, and I know the washrooms with the shower is not yet completed. Increases in quotes received at the time of budget preparation versus the actual completion cost was the cause. There was no change in the scope of the project. The main contributors to roads and streets budget include the Liverpool Bridge sidewalk redesign, the snow removal, and asphalt paving, all of which have incurred minimal expenses to date, which is why the budget percentages appear off, because you're not going to get much snow removal, we hope, before September 30th. Section 12. Environmental health services. Sewage collection, treatment, and disposal administration is insurance cost. Sewer treatment plant operations require the purchase of 2 unbudgeted pumps which cost over $26,000 but are essential to operate the sewage collection systems. Wastewater collection maintenance has exceeded the budget amount by over $22,000 due to the cost of a new connection in Milton. Staff are currently working on updates to the sewer bylaw which will remove this expense from the general ratepayers who are not receiving wastewater services. Leachate management costs under landfill expenses are at 80% of budget. Expenses are highly influenced by weather. Staff shortage has required increased operating costs and overtime to compensate. Recycling costs are down due to staffing shortages and no overtime requirements due to the temporary shutdown of the MRF facility. Section 14, environmental development. Environmental planning and zoning administration are under budget due to vacant staffing positions. We're currently advertising for 2 positions in this department. Accessibility projects are still being developed. Therefore, there has been a minimal fund spent of the $100,000 budget. And I know that staff are having challenges, again, securing our staffing resources or even contracted staffing resources to carry out some of those projects. Economic development is under budget. As the $1 million HVAC project for the Liverpool Business Development Center is in its early stages. Section 15, recreation and cultural services. Swimming pools are not closer to 100% of the budget as would be expected due to the early closures of Milton Pool. There'll be additional expenses to come to stabilize Milton Pool for the winter period. I did sign some checks this month, so they'll be on the next quarterly report. Parks and Playgrounds includes purchases of a 2023 Gator dump trailer for $18,800 and unbudgeted purchase of a 2017 Subaru for $26,000. Section 16 is our fiscal transfers, and this is when we take money from operations and move it into reserves. And that's why I broke these all out for you, because it's $2.2 million. But if you look at the detail, you see of that $2.2 million, the long-term care land sale was $939,425.50. So that income is in Section 8, so it's an in and out. And then the Sustainable Growth Fund funding for Waterloo, $763,008. So if you take those out, everything else is budgeted in there, with the exception of the Comfort Center, because at the beginning of the year, we don't know how much we're going to be taking from the reserve for comfort centers. Hillsview Acres, new revenue line added for non-resident associated funding. So I am flipping the page. This amount includes funding for the completion of the washroom renovation, tub room renovation, and exterior doors, which I am happy to say are all complete. Took 2 years, but we did get there, and I would encourage any of you, if you're up in that neck of the woods, to drop in and see Audrey and see the work that has been done there. They're still working on the floors, but it looks like a changed facility. You'd be surprised. It's amazing. We have recruitment and retention bonuses of $114,000 that's included in salary and benefits, but it's funded by the government, so it's also included in that other funding sources. The utility, which is the next page, Interest revenue much higher than budgeted due to our interest rate rising. Water treatment expenses higher than budgeted. Chemicals are at 96% of budgeted amount. Process equipment costs increase and facility repairs and maintenance over budget due to unexpected damage. Some expenses are expected to be recovered through insurance. Operating costs will continue to be over budget due to staff shortages and use of contractors for the interim. I know Director Grant is working hard to finalize our insurance claim. We will have 2 deductibles, each $10,000, because we had damage associated with 2 lightning strikes. So we are on the hook for $20,000. The rest will be submitted. They had an electrical engineer come and look at the site, so he will review all the invoices that we will submit, and then we will wait and see how much they recover. Right now, all those costs, you're looking at them there. I did not pull them out because I don't know how much of it we're going to be able to get back. Very similar to the disaster funding, I worked very closely. Our asset manager was awesome at this. Director Grant let me borrow him. We went through this exercise. We put together a funding request to provincial EMO for review. There are $18,000 in public works related expenses that are not included in this statement as they're part of that submission for reimbursement. Once reviewed, any costs that are not approved by EMO will be added to operational costs for the next quarter. I've never prepared one of these reports before, but everything that Connor and myself added were absolutely legitimate expenses. So my hope is that we're going to get the $18,000, but I'll let you know if we don't. In terms of budget impacts, I think I talked about those, and these reports will obviously be included in the meeting minutes. Is there any questions about any of the financials? Everyone still awake?
Thank you very much, Director Bino, for that very thorough report. 8.3, area rate policy discussion. So we heard from a speaker from the Greater Milligan Lake Lot Owners Association who favors what is in front of us. Well, she favors actually that we move ahead. Oh, the area rate policy. Right. It is the one in front of me. Area rate policy discussion. So probably last year we started the people applying for area rates. We ran into some difficulties. We ran into some opposition, and we asked that staff redraft or come back to us with a draft with some changes, which you see before you. So, Miss, do we want to, how do you want to handle this, council? Because this is discussion. Do you want to simply ask your questions of Ms. Vino, or do you want her to highlight the changes? It's your discussion. You want to just ask questions? Want to do it that way? Councilor Romero.
I'd like to highlight some changes as well. So could we go through it a little bit?
All right, so we have someone wanting you to highlight the changes. So if you want to highlight changes, and then we'll ask the questions.
So as part of the budget process last year, council heard, I think, very clearly that there were some concerns from the associations that some of the reporting requirements were onerous for them. And so staff were directed to go back and draft a new community rate policy based on that feedback. And so I attached that as part of the report here, so you would have had a chance to review that. And the redrafted policy makes the following specific changes. Associations could request a lump sum before. Last year, for example, the Recreation Society said we need X dollars. In the new policy, it's a cent per $100 of assessment. Is that a big deal? No. It can work either way for us as staff, whatever is easier for them. Section 10D, This section changes the reporting requirements and does not provide any independent verification of the use of funds that are collected from residents and dispersed to the organizations. The current policy requires that financial statements be prepared at a notice to reader level by a professional accountant and provided as part of the application or renewal. That was one of the big concerns that were voiced by the associations. Public consultation and vote. This is now mandatory for all new applications. I have only been here for a couple of years, so I'm not sure how often we get these applications, but if we have a new one, we have to have a vote now. Public consultation. Renewal of existing area rate. This used to include a section called accountability, and the organizations were required to provide a forecast to the end of the fiscal year, along with copies of invoices verifying expenditures to date. This requirement does not exist in the draft policy. Section 29A, donations to other organizations, is now prohibited from area rate funding. This is a new requirement in the draft policy because we had seen that some of the associations were donating funds to other associations, and council didn't want, that wasn't the intent of the area rate. Those are the big changes, with the reporting requirements being the biggest of them all. In terms of language, and we had this discussion last year during budget, the most recent set of financial statements refers to the most recent set that are completed, not the financial statement for the most recent year end. For example, if an organization's fiscal year end is December 31st, the reporting requirements for an application submitted on January 15th, 2023 would be the financial statements as of to December 31st, 2021. Not 2022, 15 days before they're supposed to have them. That's unreasonable, absolutely. If an organization's fiscal year end is March 31st, the reporting requirements for an application submitted January 15th, 2023 would be financial statements as of March 31st, 2022. The term auditor will be removed from the Appendix A, as the financial information provided is not audited nor verified by an independent party. So when you use terms like auditor, it implies an independent review, which in the new draft does not take place. And so the difference in reporting requirements between the new draft and the old is substantial, very substantial. And I understand the concerns from the association. But later on in this very meeting, we're going to talk about the road levy. And if council looks at the reporting requirements for those associations, they're going to see that they're quite stringent. And that is because these associations are being given money that the taxpayers are flowing through us and then dispersed. So we have some accountability there. And I don't know if that's something that council wants to look at as a general accountability level, because my concern is that, let's say the road levy update goes through, and then right now we're dealing with the Greater Milliga Lake folks, who are a very robust organization, and they have all their ducks in a row. But what happens when next year we have a small development that's down in Councillor Muse's district that has 12 houses? Are they going to be able to meet those same criteria? Because when we're doing a policy like this, or a policy like the road levy, or even the fire department funding policy, when we're as council, we're in charge, we're accountable for taxpayers' funds being distributed to other associations through us. So I guess that is as a concern, because you don't write a policy for one organization, you write a policy for a region. So that would be one of the things that I would caution council, because the area rates right now are $44,000. It's not a lot of money, but we could have another association coming back next year, which would be asking us for more than that. We don't know the future, we can't see it. So that's just a cautionary, kind of heads up for me. And when I wrote this with the assistance of our new CAO, I put in some key decision points that maybe we can talk about them one by one, and after that you can ask me any questions that you want. So the deadline for renewals in the new policy is January 15th. As the new policy only requires public consultation and vote for new applications, staff are not opposed to extending the deadline for renewals to February 15th, except for the year that public consultation is required, because that will take longer. So the goal is to have all of these area rates approved so that we're right in budget and we can just put them all in and the numbers in there, and the council's fine with it, and so are the associations. And there's no issue from staff extending that deadline to February 15th, whether it's the old policy or the new. Absolutely, we can do that.
Is there any question on that one? Is everyone fine with extending to a later date in February if it's a renewal? Yes?
I just have a question. Also, if they want to increase the area rate, it will be considered as a new application as well. So it'll be January 15th for new application, or if they want to increase it. So are we thinking February 15th if it's just a renewal of an area rate? Can we go to February 28th, or is the 15th the cutoff?
I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, because if you remember that the whole goal of us is to get all of these things in a row before we get close to the final draft of budget, which is our goal to get out before the end of March. But again, that's something that council will have to decide. I can tell you what concerns staff, but at the end of the day, council makes these decisions, not me. And a lot of the next points are surrounding those reporting requirements that you will have to decide on as council.
Councillor Miro, was there a reason why you asked to the end of February?
Well, I still don't understand about the financial statements. The fiscal year ends December 31st, and the reporting requirements would be December 31st, 2021. I still can't wrap my head around that, because you're not getting the most recent amounts.
No, you're absolutely right. You're not getting the most recent amounts, but you're getting the most recent set of financial statements that have been independently reviewed. And if you were going with that logic, which is what the old policy was, it also included that accountability piece. So when you're applying for your rate for the upcoming year, you provide us with a forecast. This is what we spent to date with our invoices. So while we don't have the exact number that you're spending, we have a good idea of where you are in terms of, for example, if an organization spent $3,000 and they were given 30 and they were 10 months into their fiscal year, I would probably ask some questions about are you saving your money up for a big project between now and the end of the year? Do you know what I mean? But that year-to-date kind of forecast, it doesn't exist in the new community, the new community area rate draft. It's not there.
And that was a question I had. I noted this used to include a section called accountability. So why would we not want them to provide a forecast to the end of the fiscal year along with copies of the invoices verifying the expenditures to date? That's not asking for an audited statement. That's simply asking for verification that what you've done with the money last year we gave you, how you're going to spend it. I'm not sure how the rest of council feels, but when I look forward and seeing that repeating people might be able to just keep getting the same area rate for up to 10 years, that sort of gives a red flag to me. What's the reaction of other councillors on people who have area rates and they want them again next year, but they don't even have to show what they did with their money that we gave them last year? I understand why it has to be a year back to get the official statement, but that leaves them a whole year. Councillor Charlton?
Thank you. I am concerned about like inconsistency in regards to accountability because I'm just sitting here thinking when I was on the Queen's Daycare Board, we had applied for a community investment fund. There were a lot of requirements that had to be provided, and you get a certain percentage of your funds. I can't remember, I think it was 80%. And you got the final 20% when you submitted your final report and you showed where you spent your money and all these things. So I don't remember all of these specific things being raised last year. I do remember, you know, there were concerns from the area rate group, but I'm just wondering, I guess my concern is there should be consistency because if we're requiring so much of a community hall, for example, and then not an area rate, I am concerned, I guess, about that. And I think there does have to be accountability. I specifically remember there being an issue with like the audited financial, that like I thought that was really the concern. So I'm just wondering if it doesn't have to be audited, like is that really what we should be talking about and not all these other suggestions? I'm not sure if I'm understanding this right. So if someone could clarify, that would be great.
So I'll just review for a minute the 3 levels of assurance, ASSUR, ANC, assurance that is provided by public accountants. There's notice to reader, there's review, and there's audit. We, as a region of Queens, are required to have an audit done. It's very expensive. It requires hours and hours of testing of actual transactions. A review is a step back from that. They don't do a lot of testing, but they do a lot of digging. They will look at reasonability of bank statements, cash flows from one year to the next. It's not as expensive as an audit, but it still costs. Now, the issue that we heard at the meeting, I recall, was that the cost of a notice to reader, which is the basic level of assurance, where you take your receipts, your QuickBooks file or your Simply file into a public accountant. They turn them through their caseware software into financial statements. Then a partner signs off on them that yes. So the staff looks at them and look at them for reasonability. Do they do testing? No. Not unless they actually had to input all the receipts, which sometimes you do. They also look at bank statements to make sure your bank statements are reconciled every month, to make sure your HST is filed every month. You do those basic checks. Do they catch anything? No. Does an audit catch anything? Everything? No. It's just a way to mitigate risk. So the biggest ticket assurance level is audit. It costs the most. Does it guarantee that they're going to catch fraud or anything like that? Nope. They have a better chance of catching it because they do more work. So the notice to readers, I believe we heard, were $2,000 or $3,000. So it was a significant amount of money when you're looking at the Brooklyn Cemetery Association, for example, who I believe received just under 10. Like, that's a considerable amount. And one of the things, just as we were speaking here, I thought, you know what? Maybe we could do something very similar that we do for our low income tax rebates. We could look at a tiered system. If your association receives, and I hope this is CAO Cody, I don't know if this is within the MD or not, just off the cuff here, because I'm trying to make this work for everybody. If the association receives less than a certain amount of money, then you're okay with no independent review. You're okay with just someone filling in this at the back of financial information and maybe adding up the bank statement so I can have a look at those, or my manager of finance can have a look at those under a certain amount of money. And then having it tiered up. So when we get to associations like the Greater Milliga Lake folks, who are a very robust organization, we are going to be collecting over $100,000 for them easily. Those reporting requirements carry a lot more teeth, a lot more weight. And maybe that's one of the things that we can work on as staff to bring back to you as counselors to make sure that you are comfortable. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
That's why discussion's good, and that discussion, that makes sense. To me.
That was me, sorry, my fault. Go for it.
Oh, sorry.
One, I think this is a great discussion, and I think the question really for us as staff is trying to understand what council's risk tolerance is. That's what we're trying to get at, to understand what's your risk tolerance. And I love the idea of a tiered system. I don't know if it works, but I think if council likes the idea, then maybe that's something we investigate and bring back. I think that's what we're trying to get at is we're trying to find that we recognize what council's trying to achieve, which is for a $5,000 organization, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but for 150, you probably want to protect that money a bit more. So yeah, this is really helpful dialogue, and I think it's good.
Good now. Yeah, there was a question about maybe having the audit done every year, like that we could be going on 10 years without anything, but whenever anybody puts in an application, they're going to be giving their most recent statement. So the most we would see was 1 year that wasn't audited. So if somebody came in on January 15th or February 15th, they would have 1 year that wasn't a fully audited statements. You're not going to see 10 years because the next year they come in, the following year is going to be done. So it's going to be a 1 year moving average. It's not going to be the whole 10 years that are not looked at. So I have enough risk tolerance that I think that's probably okay for a lot of these small organizations.
If I could, the policy states that if I had a community organization and we applied for an area rate, we could keep that same area rate for up to 10 years without having without the public being able to say, we don't want this area rate anymore?
The new policy, that's what it says. It says you must have public consultation every 10 years. It doesn't say you can't have it in any of the intervening years.
Okay.
It just says you must have it every 10, so that what happened last time doesn't happen again, you know? Yeah, and I think I have to wrap my head around this, because if we're going to look at reporting requirements, that should be a process in and of itself. And so the policies would then just refer to the reporting requirements. So the area rate policy or the road levy policy would refer to our reporting requirements. Yeah, so I think that can work.
I think 10 years is too long. A lot can take place in 10 years. My suggestion would be that it would be done once per council term in the third year of the council term. I think that would be much better. I find 10 years is still too long. And we're talking about the road levy and we're talking about the area rate. Those are the same, but they're different. The road levy's not going to have, there won't be a meeting, there won't be a vote, not like the area rate. So we're talking kind of about the same thing. We're talking about, you know, the money going in and us looking after the money and distributing it, but we're also talking about two different things.
So the road levy association is part of the due diligence that every single association has to do is they have to have an AGM with a vote by all of their members that says, yes, we agree to this road levy. It's not something that's arbitrarily done. So the difference, Councillor Amaro, would be that in that case, the association holds the meeting and then includes that information in their application. But in the area rate, it would be the region of Queens that would host the meeting with the councillor in question that would do that. And I'm just going to ask you a question because I made a note. You said about having that meeting the third year of a council term. And I wonder if it might be, and this is only my suggestion, if it might be better to have it in the first year of a council term, because that will familiarize a new council with all the area rates in the area, rather than the third year. Just a thought.
The only thing I was thinking was, it would kind of give even the second year maybe, but a new counselor, it would actually give them time to get in and better understand the community. I'm fine with, the second year instead of the third year, but I'm just thinking it would give them more time to get familiar with the area rate, the community, whatnot.
Yeah, I know that when we came in, most of us were new councilors, and, we get elected and we start roughly the 1st of November. We're trying to figure out what's going on. We're learning the rules of order, things like that. And then starting in January, we have meetings on budget. And, we're 6 weeks as new councilors coming in the first year of their term. It's a lot to take in. But I agree with having it early in the mandate, because then council can set their direction for what they see as the direction that the county will take, or the region will take, but maybe not the first year.
Well, one of the things that I haven't been in this job long enough to be, involved with the orientation of a new council, but that could certainly be something that I could include to discuss with them. But I understand why it would be overwhelming when you're elected in October and then boom, we've got associations knocking at the door in January. So I get that. So what I'll do is I'll put it in as a second year for now, not every 10, second year of a council term. When I bring back the draft, and I will, yes, that's what I will do.
So I just have a quick question. So if a new organization applies for an area rate in the last year of council term, and they have to have a public vote, because that's what it says, and then 2 years later they have to have another public vote. Whereas if someone else could have been has a time span of a year between their public votes. I'm just trying to see it from the association's viewpoint. Because my association, we just had our public vote 2 years ago, and now we have to expend out another one. Whereas Councillor Charlton's association had one the first, X number of years ago, and I just can see what the comments.
But when I draft the policy, I can maybe consider that and say the second year of a council term for any existing area rates before a certain year. I think there's language around that we can get out of that if that's something that council wishes to avoid. And again, just because it says every 2 years, it doesn't say you can't do it. It says you have to do it every 10. And now we're going to say you have to do it on the second year unless you just had an application in the year before. So, this has to work and it has to be flexible. So I think we can work maybe with the CAO and work some language in there.
Thank you. So to clarify, in regards to the Great Maliga levy there, if that goes forward, you mentioned that they have to have an AGM and show that there's support from their members. But other than that, there is no big meeting like Councillor Mira said about like an actual vote. Like these are very different in that regard, right? Like they have to have their AGM. But I'm just thinking if they can have an AGM and show that their members support, then what's the difference for like Brooklyn area, their area rate, where they could do the same thing and they could have their AGM, they submit the documents to the region showing their members are in support. Like I'm just wondering why we would make an organization like that do it every couple of years and then another one not. So I'm just worried about consistency, and maybe I'm not understanding it properly.
In lot associations, every every member of the lot association is a member. When it comes to community area rates, every taxpayer is not a member of that organization. So from the Greater Malaga Lot Association, every person on those roads will be collecting the money for it because they're all members. But in, say, Brooklyn, for example, organization phone might apply for money, but the majority of people that live in Brooklyn may not be part of this organization, but they got to pay the taxes toward this organization that is no benefit to them. That's the difference. That's a huge difference.
So, but if you are a resident of Brooklyn in those specific districts, you are paying the Brooklyn area rate whether you want to or not. So
Correct. That's why it's a community vote.
Right. I just feel like myself personally, I don't have enough like clarification and understanding of this, and I feel like it would be more helpful to have a little bit more information. Like I wouldn't be comfortable giving any direction in how I feel, because I just in thinking like a community investment fund, like I mentioned earlier, and other things. I guess is there consistency? Because is it easier for one group than another? I think there has to be some consistency, and maybe there is, and I just am not.
Well, think about the inconsistency between our fire departments. The groups that we give the most money to, with hardly any accounting required back in the form of, when I think of what people have to submit for community investment funding, compared to other groups that we give major money to when we start doing road levies and collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of those big roads, that we'll be collecting money just from those members who live on those roads. We collect it all, and if they don't pay it, we can put lien on property and end up tax sale for not paying a road levy, and we put it back out there. I think it's very difficult. And then we have diversity and inclusion action, who just can give $1,000 grants out with hardly no financial resources asked if you need it or not, just an application form. So there is no standard for how we provide money when it comes to what we expect in return. Because we're all over the page, from diversity, inclusion, action to community investment is quite, you get this much, and then you get your 20 when you show. I'm not sure how community facade, how much I don't think they request that businesses show they have the financial need. You don't have to show financial need to get facade money. So that's a whole different topic and if you want to have it, staff can try to think about how we could, if there was a way to ensure that whoever we are giving taxpayer money to, that they all have undergone the same scrutiny in that they need it and that they're spending it responsibly. I think that's your question. Like, why do some jump through have to do so much work?
Yeah, if I may, I think what I'm hearing council say is they're interested in having staff come back with some kind of tiered reporting process. Check, no problem. We'll make sure that's done. And to try to make them perhaps apply across a wide berth of potential grants that you might give out, or road levies and those sorts of things. So I think, got it, we can do that 100% and bring it back for further discussion. So I think that applies to both the road levy and the area rate. So I think that I think I understand what it is council's asking for. So I think we're happy to do that and bring it back to you. And so I hope the conversation continues. We can maybe park that part once we have a chance to bring something back. If at least I've captured the overall opinion of council. If I've missed something, then by all means let me know. But I think we'd be happy to take a crack at something and come back.
I know we're dealing with a higher level of money with the road levy, so I'm just wondering, could we not have a meeting and vote with registered votes like the area rate and have it all straight across the board?
You're referring to road levy?
Yes.
That has to be done only through their members, and they have to have a certain majority. Councillor Brown will speak to this because he's familiar with how those road levy, what went on at the annual general.
With Greater Maliga, for the last 2 years, they've been at their AGMs, they've been talking to their members, letting them know that they're asking for this road levy, letting them know what the process will be, letting them know what the upsides and the downsides. They've been very good about it. But every member of a lot owners association signs on to be a member of that association, and they're invited to the AGM. Unlike the area rate that we're discussing right now, this is everybody in a tax district. So, like in Greater Maliga, it's only people who live in LaBelle on a certain area. The people in Greenfield, the people in Handley's Point, the people in Pond Hook are not part of this lot owners association, but they're in that tax district. And that's why they're asking for this road levy, is because they can't ask for an area rate because everybody in Greenfield would pay for private roads in LaBelle. So it's apples and oranges, but they've been making sure that everybody that's a member of the association, that comes to the association, that comes to the AGM, has a chance to vote. And it has been unanimous the last 2 years that people want to push this forward. I think they're looking at the possibility of having a public meeting, open it up, again. And there's reporting. I mean, we have audited financial statements. Grant Thornton does the books for Greater Maliga, so it's a high standard that comes in. They do very detailed budgets every year, and I'm sure that would be part of what they're asking for, because it's going to be a large chunk of money. This road levy is not $20,000, $30,000. It's probably going to be closer to $250,000 to do the roads. So it's a sizable chunk of money. And it's a very responsible group that have a very defined set of bylaws that they have to work under.
So if I may, Councillor Charlton, what I will do, and because it's also a learning for me, is I'm going to look in the Municipal Government Act and look at the areas on area rates and the areas on road levies and provide clarity as much as I can in the staff report that we'll bring back, so that we all understand why there's the distinction, and clarify what Councillor Brown said, because he's absolutely right. The difference is, yeah. So I think there's some things there that I can bring back in the report.
Thank you. I would really appreciate that. One other question I was going to ask, but forgot, was in regards to area rates and holding these public meetings. Has it been looked at before in other municipalities who have these area rates, like what their standard procedure is for things like this?
Well, I think the area rates procedures they're outlined in the MGA, because it is a rate that applies to an entire district. So have I called the municipality of Lunenburg, for example, and asked them? No, because I don't know if that's specified in the Municipal Government Act that municipal units must hold public consultation, or every 10 years or 5 years, whatever it is. But I have to clarify that. But I can do that too. That part of what I'll bring back is some of those anecdotal situations from other units.
Just for clarity, we can absolutely do an environmental scan if that's what you're asking for, Councillor Tarleton. Like what other municipalities do, so that you can use that as a reference point. Yeah, absolutely, we can do that.
I think we have a staff that might want to, and it's a discussion, so not from the table, but from here, please.
So sorry to interrupt, but when Eric Levy and I put this
draft policy together, we did do an environmental study of other municipal units. So I have all that information that I can supply to the CAO or to the Director of Corporate Services to bring back to you guys. Everybody.
Thank you.
So can I just go over a couple other things with Joanne? The application fee has changed, I see, from $250 to $325. What's the reason for that?
I would say that I would say, and perhaps Angela can respond more to this because she was involved with the redraft, I was not, that it's most likely increased because that was the charges that we're seeing in the other units. But again, I can look back and I can make sure why is the fee changed and address that issue.
Great. Just under voting eligibility, we had one problem with the last area rate meeting that we had. One person owned multiple properties. So under number 20, it says any person who owns property within the assessment district or districts are eligible to vote or to cast a vote. But could we have that changed to any person who owns properties within the assessment district? Just because it just clarifies that you can only have one vote. It doesn't matter if you have multiple properties or not. Wonderful. Number 25 also says section 22 with a written request to decrease the area rate amount. Section 22 is about the vote, so it should say section 23. Let me see. Section 20, number 28C, I also noticed that it said community beautification and cleanup, including maintenance of cemeteries. This list is for everyone in general, so it would be nice to see just properties put there instead of cemeteries. Sorry.
So when you say properties, that's a very broad term. So properties owned by the association, perhaps?
If I could, one of the issues we ran into last year was protesting the area rate for the cemetery. So the maintenance of cemeteries clearly outlines that area rates can be applied for maintenance of cemeteries. So that it's very important to have that in there because that was one of the main complaints, was that municipal governments should not be paying for maintenance of cemeteries.
So can we just make that addition with the cemeteries in there as well? Yeah, thank you. Just have another one, sorry. Number 29, and that would be E. Construction of recreation facilities or comparable facilities already owned and operated by the Region of Queens Municipality in the assessment district or reasonable proximity. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a conflict there where we're doing improvements to the Hank Snow Playground because it is within reasonable proximity. And I'm wondering if we could put other than parks that are already existing. I just don't want any conflicts there in upgrading the park where it is close to the new accessible playground. And 29A. reallocation of funds to other community organizations as gifts, grants, or other donation without services rendered. We have a soccer club that uses the old baseball field. So does this mean that we cannot buy like a box for them or anything like that?
Without services rendered, so I think it means a donation for no consideration. So, and that was something that was discussed specifically because there were donations being made to other organizations through the community, the area rate funding. So it was a concern, and that's why that's in there. Relocation of funds to other community organizations as gifts, grants, or other donation without services rendered. So, for example, if you had a baseball team and they were doing a fundraiser, and I'm just making this up as I go, and the Recreation Association said, look, if you guys come and you blitz all our playgrounds and you pick up all our garbage and you do give us, an afternoon, and for that we'll donate $50, that's consideration. So they've done something for that 50, not just here's $50. That's my understanding of that. That'd be, yeah.
Okay, so now what if, I know that Brooklyn Recreation does do a donation to the Legion on Remembrance Day, so how would that be considered?
That would be a no unless they got a wreath for that donation or a twig or something.
I have one question. Is it in the MGA Act that in order to vote at an area rate, you have to be eligible to vote in municipal elections? Which means if you're not a Nova Scotian owning property, only Nova Scotians who are 19 or older can vote in municipal elections. So therefore, because that was a complaint I heard from non-residents and people from outside the province who have substantial properties, that they had no vote in the area rate. So is that an MGA? Is that an MGA stipulation?
I
You'll
don't
check
know.
that?
So I'm going to
I
check
don't know
that
it.
specifically because, again, that's a point of clarification and that's why we're here.
Okay.
So, yep.
Are there any other questions before we send Ms. Vino back to the drawing board?
Okay, I think we've got a good opportunity right now to overhaul this, since we're overhauling it a lot. That one of our restrictions is that we can't change the size of the district where we collect our area rates. We're bound by our language that keeps saying certain assessment districts. And we ran into that down at Seaside Center, where the assessment district ran into 2 voting districts and 2 separate communities, where if we had the ability to change it down to a smaller area that just covered that community hall, it probably would have passed. And that's where we get into this thing with Greater Maliga, is they would love to have had an area rate, but they couldn't have an area rate because it covered all of Greenfield, all of West Queens or East Queens like that. So if we make it so that we could change it into smaller than a taxation district, which a lot of jurisdictions do. I know in HRM they have homeowners associations like Westwood Hills. They're not a complete taxation district, but they collect an area rate for their community fundraiser. So it is possible, I think, under the MGA. And it's also would allow us for something that's coming up late down the road with the water request for the Point and the Dauphin Farm, that we could impose an area rate on people to cover the cost of infrastructure. It wouldn't be paid for by everybody in that taxation district. It would only be paid for by people who use it. So it allows us to a little more latitude if we can break it down into groups smaller than a taxation district.
I believe everything's possible, Councillor Brown. I think staff need to look at the cost and the amount of staff time it would take to do that, which then gets reflected back on the application fee. It's easy to pull out the assessment district out of the files, but that is something that staff could come back with remarks about their recommendation on that. Mhm.
It's me. That I didn't know was possible, so you've taught me something new, and I absolutely will clarify that and find out how we go about doing that, because it does open a lot of possibilities, especially seeing as how we're looking at, and I think it's next on the agenda, growth. So absolutely, it would be a good thing to have. So thank you for that.
So, under the accountability, this says the Director of Corporate Services shall bring forth changes to this policy when appropriate to the Chief Administrative Officer for review. Is there anything in there that says that that will come to council, or does the Chief Administrator, CAO have final authority over any changes?
It's my understanding that all policies come to council. My responsibility is to take it to the CAO and make sure he or she is comfortable with it as presented before it gets to you. That's my understanding, but policies must be adopted by council.
Okay, thank you. In section 18, it says should more than one applicant request an area rate in the same assessment district, the cost of the application fees may be divided. If we've got two groups that want area rates that are widely divergent, like if almost should have two separate separate public meetings. If they don't have anything in common, it doesn't make sense to try to put two meetings together with things that are completely, just my thought on that. And 29, prohibited uses, and it's new sidewalks. And I'm just thinking that, is that because we don't want to create infrastructure for public works to clean, or is that, I think we should be looking at building new sidewalks and building, communities that we can get around in better. I'm just curious why that one was left out and prohibited.
I think, and I'll confirm with our other staff, that I'm thinking that that's probably one of those best practice things that we're seeing in other jurisdictions, and I don't know if Director Grant will be comfortable with associations building sidewalks in the region independently.
Thank you.
Do we have any other comments on this for now? Then we'll come back again in another draft form. Okay. Growth planning and the CBCO report.
If I may. Just going back to the previous topic for 1 second, that was really helpful conversation. Thank you for all of the thorough review and input on that. We muchly appreciate it. So one of the things that I heard fairly early on was about possible extension to Mount Pleasant. I apologize for putting Pleasant Street in here. I was corrected, and I appreciate that. So I had heard a lot about it. Obviously, we got a report back, and that is attached to this, and there's a lot of meat in there. There's a lot for even us as staff to read a 4th, 5th, and 18th time, quite frankly. But it did identify for us a number of issues just operationally. There are a number of things that we need to address, lift stations that are at or beyond capacity, some capital work that we were already planning on doing. So we wanted to make sure that this report got on the agenda so that it could be public and people could start reviewing it and thinking about it. But it did bring to light, and we have had this conversation, at least high level internally with some of the other directors, about that we are probably not well situated for growth. We're not really ready to respond to it. And that this report sort of maybe was the catalyst to sort of point that out to us. So there's a couple things in here. One is as staff, our suggestion is that there probably needs to be a more thorough sharing of information around what the challenges are, what going forward could look like, what growth planning or growth plan could look like. And that we would suggest that maybe the starting point would be in the new year through a workshop or two to unpack some of this information so that council and staff, but mostly council, are armed with the information they need to have a rigorous debate and dialogue around that topic. That said, so that's one piece. And then the other piece in here that I would be remiss in sort of highlighting is that there is an infrastructure grant that has been put out by the province in the tune of 32 million. We are, I think, well positioned to apply for it because it is about growth. So we can't put in a grant about and not include something about an extension, right? Because it's about growth. But there is a number of things in our capital budget that this report highlighted that we're going to have to do anyway. So increasing pipes and lift stations and a number of other things. I'm just using those as examples. So an infrastructure grant could be helpful because it may actually save us money that you might otherwise have to spend anyway. So we're hoping for some clear indication from council tonight, and I don't want to change your process, but it would be helpful to have perhaps even a vote on that, so that we know for sure council's behind it. But I guess I'd be asking for some clear indication from council as to whether they would entertain an extension given some of these numbers. And if so, then, and if they're interested in applying for a grant, then we would go ahead and work towards putting in a grant application. That will take a lot of work. So that's why we need some clear indication from council. And if so, then we would bring it back on the December 12th council meeting for motion. Because in order to apply for the grant, we need a clear motion of council. They're supporting this. They're intending and moving forward on it. And we can't just apply and see what happens. There needs to be sort of some commitment from council through motion. So that's pretty high level, but I wanted to know sort of where council stood on those two topics.
I think in fairness to council, we need some straight language on what CBCL is stating. I know they said, and I know other councillors have always questioned, yes, we all favor growth. We understand we need mixed growth, but who's going to pay for it? So yes, we know it's been identified. We need new lift stations. They're going to cost millions. We need to continue the extension of water. That's already in part of our budget. So I guess my comment would be, you're asking us for approval for what? To apply for money that, like, how much, and how much does that then mean that we're going to commit to in the future? I guess I'd like to understand the total amount of, it's one thing to say we'll apply for a grant for $1 million, but the growth is going to cost you 15 million. Mm-hmm. I think council needs to know the numbers before we can say apply for $1 million, and it means that we're going to be on the hook for, so maybe just some straight language.
Yeah, if I could, and then I'm going to pass it over to Director Grant just for some context. So part of our challenge in answering that question is going to be, there's also a myriad of options that you have in front of you, right? So to what degree are we talking about? And then what does that degree cost? So there's lots of sort of question marks even for us about how to even, quite frankly, answer that question. And we have done some work, but there's a lot of work ahead of us to actually put that grant together. But high level, I think we're talking like $10 million is the ask, quite frankly. So just to give council some context. anyway, so I'll pass it over to Director Grant to talk about, but just to understand that we have a lot of questions too, and so what we're trying to do is take the temperature of council on this topic.
Thank you. I really don't know where to start. It's pretty comprehensive, even preliminary report at this point. So, you know, quick hits, looking at 54% growth, 60-something hectares, another 1,000 people on top of 2,500 just in Liverpool, not speaking of what's in Brooklyn, what's in Milton connected to our system. So it's very big, it's substantial. Tried to look at it in a few different ways to comprehend it on my end, I guess. We have issues with our lift stations, we have issues with our water transmission, and then we have system expansion as well to kind of support this. To see all three of those conditions satisfied, I guess the ask preliminary would be 12 million. Not to get too far into the workshop that we need to undertake to understand where we go from here. There'd be additional on top of that to provide additional level of service. But I think to get in the door, 12 million is the number to consider right now to enable a reasonable level of development. That's the minimum. It will be more than that when the day comes. I guess if there's any questions kind of from there.
So our reasonable level gets us to across from daycare, right? The housing proposal across from the daycare, and then the two both housing proposals out further. The three.
That's
three
correct.
proposals.
Yeah. So based on the study from CVCL, the preliminary numbers that they provided, and their recommendation, these are decision-making numbers. They're not go take out a loan for $12 million. That's what it's going to cost, but it's to rank them in a level how it's going to progress through there. One of the big things in this study is what level of fire protection you want to plan. That's one of the things we really need to think about. Most of Liverpool's underserviced from fire flow perspective. So do we want to try to change that globally in our community, or do we want to just target this one area? And that's an approach we can take and we can discuss. And from there, you're looking $6.5 million up to $10-15 million to what level of fire protection do you want to provide, like other communities provide.
Councillor Muse?
So, with the grant money, and we're making the pipe figure coming down Turner Drive, can we apply for grant money to do that and tie it into the other system?
No, not alone. The grant program is specific to growth, so we would have to tie a growth element to it. So not just the pipe, but it would have to be the main pipe plus an extension. Somewhere in the grant application, we'd have to talk about an extension.
But if we can't get the water down now with the size pipe that we have, isn't that really growth? Saying that we have to have a bigger pipe to put it down in?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So without the transmission main installed, we can't entertain growth. So it is definitely a portion of it, but just putting the transmission main in isn't part of the funding application, what they're looking for. So it's enabling growth and seeing growth actually enabled. I guess it's double-edged in that sense.
So the way I understand it is a lot of the questions that council will have on fire flows and water pressures and things that we want to achieve will be figured out in the workshops. If we apply for this grant, we stand a chance to acquire infrastructure funds for things that we need and things that we want. So like best of both worlds if we can access that. So I think we don't have to go like super far in the weeds, and I would be really excited to see support in moving forward for our staff to apply for this grant. The deadline is December 13th, so that we could potentially get funds to do all of this. And at the end of the day, we either find out we're acquiring funds and plan accordingly, or we find out we're not acquiring funds and plan accordingly. So I think this is a good plan. I'm really happy with this, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Charlton. And I agree with that. If this fund is there, we apply. And if we lose out on this one, we apply for the next. It does help us some on this journey, which, 47% growth on our utility system is a very costly thing to do. Because that's basically what it would be, as Director Grant said, putting 47% more on the system, which we know some of it's back to 1915. So we need to spend money for growth in all areas. Even if Brooklyn were to have growth, we hear down there all the time the call for service on Hillside. And the system really just can't handle anymore. So we do need to improve the system for growth, and doesn't hurt to try. I mean, it's a big homework to get done, but I believe we do need to try.
I think, we're looking at a number of $12 million. And it sounds like a lot of money, and we've got 400 units that want to go in most jurisdictions. The developer has to pay for that extension. So if you break that down into 400 units at $12 million, that's $30,000 a unit, and they can take that as an area rate or an assessment on their property, or it's roughly a 5% cost on what our developer was talking the price of it would be. It's also cheaper than what a rural property pays for a well and a septic system. Because right now, if I put a well and a septic system on my property in LaBelle, I'm looking at about $35,000, $40,000 up to $50,000. So $30,000 assessment to get water and sewer to their property without putting a strain on the rest of the residents of Queens County or the rest of the water utility who are not going to see any benefit from it is not a huge stretch. And I think changing our area rate request, or the way we write our area rates, allows us to put the cost on the people who benefit from it and not on everybody else.
So, clarification, so are you not in favor of us applying for funds?
Well, I think absolutely we should apply for the funds, and that would lower the liability to the people. But if we do get the funds, we're still going to have to come up with a lot of money, and we still have to figure out who's paying for it. So I think when we, just to get the idea out there, that if we change our area rate, the way we apply our area rates, that allows us to recoup it from the people who primarily benefit from it.
So we'll take one step at a time, apply for the funding. If achieved, then we need to figure out where the rest of our money would come from. But we do have to fix those pump stations and all those things anyway.
I guess just to comment on Councillor Brown. So I think there's two separate avenues we need to go down. We need to figure out the technical side and the financial side. And part of the financial side we've already been working on with the sewer bylaw. And when speaking of an area rate, it's probably more commonly termed as a development charge, which is imposed or levied on the property developer when they connect, which is part of what the sewer bylaw review was looking at. So,
thank you.
Is there anyone not in favor of staff putting forward a growth development fund? So there's your direction.
Sorry, I'm just taking head nods. I got 3 here. Sorry, I didn't look over there.
I was just going to suggest, if it's better comfort level, I could move that this come back as a recommendation at the next meeting to apply for the grant application. Is that what you're looking for?
That would make me happy.
I so move.
Yeah. All in favor?
Thank you.
So we'll see it as a recommendation under next. 8.5, Liverpool Library site selection. 4 staff members involved. Past interim CEO wrote this and approved by our current CAO. So who's taking the lead?
I'll give it a shot. And by the way, Dan, if you're watching, I miss you. Um, uh, given that there's a lot of history, we thought that it was important to put everything out on paper. In terms of sort of articulating how we got to where we are today. I can appreciate that this is has been a challenging topic, and so what we've done is, as staff, is sort of put this report together that articulates the history. And if you look on the, what is it, third page in or something, it says options. So essentially, and again, still learning the discussion versus recommendation approach, but essentially as staff, what we understood about what council's expecting perhaps would be sort of what's articulated under options and then one. So here are the things that we would go ahead and proceed and do. Obviously, council always has the opportunity, if they choose, to back up or stop or whatever. But if you want to proceed, as we've been discussing, it's really what's under option one, and then sort of A, B, C, D are the things that we would need to start to take steps forward on. And because this is for discussion, we just want to put it on the agenda, outline all the information we possibly could, and obviously we'd be hoping for a motion at the next meeting that provides some clear direction. But yeah, so I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say except to hear what council has to say about it.
Comments?
Okay. As the chair of the library steering committee, we had a meeting. We went down and walked through the Liverpool Business Development Center site. They were very excited over the site. It is a blank slate, green space on the side that can be accommodating. A new entrance which can be put on as well. The infrastructure's there. There's a new HVAC system going in. Timeline is much less, 10 months to a year from the time that we give the go-ahead. It could be completed. As we all know, the library is in dire need now of a new location. It's up for sale, and the conditions are not as good as they should be. We may need a little bit of upgrading to electrical, but that's all in place. There's no stormwater to worry about. They can actually design, it's just a blank slate, so they can design the library how they'd like to design it, with the teen room and the kids' rooms, the washrooms, the kitchen, and also it would be a facility kind of on its own. It would have a separate entrance. There's no noise that goes over to the call center. They're on a separate side. And they've tested that already because they had a band in there to see if they could hear anything. So there would be no noise transferred at all. That is just some of the things that we were discussing at the meeting. The only, I guess, problem that they encountered, or their only concern, was that the location. The location is on this side of the schools, which is a good thing, because the kids can still make their way over to this vicinity. Is not across town. And I read the previous minutes also, and noted in the minutes, they noted that there would be fewer walkers to the new Queen's Place site, if that was developed versus the current location. And they also noted that there are less walkers now because of like carrying books. So another suggestion was we have Queens County Transit to help out with that issue. Maybe we could set up a library day, morning or afternoon, that may work. There's pros and cons to every project, but I think we really need to think out of the box on this one. We had the estimate come in for the pool. We was hoping it wouldn't be any more than 5 million, as we have a donor for 3, and it come in at 7.1. We have 3 million for a library, but as our last interim CAO had discussions, I'm not sure if we could build a library for $3 million in this day and age. And also the shortage of labor right now is making it very hard to get anything accomplished. This building is up, it's ready, it can be worked on anytime, any weather. So it can be ready to go. The library now has 4,750 square feet. This has 7,000 square feet, so it's allowing quite a bit of area for potential development. And I guess that's pretty well all I have to say.
Other comments? Councillor Gidney.
Has the committee considered like a town hall to discuss it with the public as to location? Has that ever been brought up or discussed?
Not the couple of meetings that I was there, but Councillor Brown may have, he was to 3/4 of the meetings. I just stepped in, so he may have a comment on that.
Yeah, there was a public meeting, not so much to give the public feedback on any locations that were given. It was to ask the public what they wanted. And that was in the design phase. We really asked the public what they wanted to see in a library. And that really formulated our selection criteria. Like it you know, that we had a matrix of 12 or 14 items that we looked at. And those really came from that public input of what people wanted for a library. Yeah, so I think that's about the only public input they had, and that one was held by the Social Public Library. Took care of that one.
Just a comment about that. That meeting was advertised just a few days before it was held. I did attend that. I think Councillor Amira was there as well. There were probably about, at most I would say 7 or 8 people in attendance. 3 of us were members from council. We had a previous staff member there as well. Sorry, was Councillor Guinea finished? Did you have other questions, or I just didn't know if I was taking over? I know, like, this library has been obviously a difficult process to the comment made earlier. Thank you for those comments also. What we have to realize is we're here regardless, and there's 13 months remaining on the lease for the library space. It's not a great situation as the building is for sale. I think that if there were a shiny new library being built, there should be tons of public engagement about that. I think that, you know, was missed early on, although we are now here in a different direction. I do not believe that we could have built that library for the cost that was suggested. I think that was underestimated. The reality is, if we don't get this library into space, we will lose it, which I would be upset to see. I think there are many people in our community who would be devastated about that. I also think that if that, you know, standalone library we're proceeding that it would require a lot of grant support, because I just don't, I can't wrap my head around the $3 million price tag when I look at the report here where it's saying the cost is estimated at $1 million for the Liverpool Business Development building beside us, where there's already water, sewer, parking, power, and all of those things. So I don't think the time is right for a brand new library. I most certainly do support our library, want to see a space, and I think that this is a compromise for the current situation that we are in, and also the pressures for things like infrastructure. If we just go back to that report earlier, we have all these things that we didn't even know we have to deal with that came to light because of a expansion request, and I think that we're just trying to take on too much. So my preference would be to have this in the Liverpool Business Development Center so that we can make sure we have a library space for our residents.
Other comments? Councillor Muse.
One of the things, the budget impacts, I brought up to the CEO today. I was just wondering if you found out the source of funds for remaining 0.8 million is the Canada Community Building Fund.
Joanne's going to save the day.
Back again. So the year that we approved the library, there was $2.2 million that were surplus funds for that year. We got double transfer payments that year, and we had an extra $1 million in deed transfer tax that was transferred to our special operating reserve. And then there was $800,000 that we had earmarked from what was then called the gas tax, but it's now called the Canada Communities Building Fund. And I did clarify today to make sure, because this is an existing building, not a brand new build, that we can still use funds from the Canada Communities Building Funds towards the cost of a library renovation in an existing building that's owned by the region. Yes, yes you can.
Are there other comments? Councillor Brown.
I don't think anybody's going to be surprised that I'm not happy with this selection of a site. You know, it didn't match the criteria that we went through as early on in the committee. I don't like the way the process was done, that this decision was taken away from the selection committee that we impaneled. This was, you know, and it almost feels like this is a decision that we can save $2 million because we're $2 million over on the swimming pool. It doesn't feel right to me to do it for those reasons. But I also realize that we have to have a library. And, you know, it's, I don't like the decision. I haven't heard a positive response from anybody in the community. Every response I've gotten to this, the word getting out where we're putting it, has been negative. I think we have a lot of issues that are going to take away from it. I think we don't have good sidewalks. We don't have good access for people to get there, even if they do want to walk. I don't think those are insurmountable hardships. I think we could probably put a trail in, like there's the ATV trail. We can probably find ways to get people there. They're not great ways, but it's just, yeah, I'm not real happy with it.
Other comments? Before I recognize Councillor Muse, has already spoken again? No, Councillor Muse?
Prior to Council's Ryan comments, I don't see that the $2 million that was saved on the library is going to go towards a pool. I think that was sort of context to do this at all. It was done wrong. It was brought up at the last council that we should be looking at putting it into the call center, the library. It was brought up with this council, and it was never really listened to. I don't know what the reasons are. I could say a lot, but I'm not really sure. So now that we found out that it can be made into a library, I think it's the best way to go.
Councillor Hawks?
Well, I think we gotta look at the future of that call center building to say, is that always gonna be a call center building? Or are we gonna use that for something else? Cause that's an asset that we should use. And there's no reason why we can't use it because call centers do not stay forever. We've already proved that once.
I have to agree with Councillor Hawks as well. We do have to look at that, and we have to look at the 2 million that we're putting in an HVAC system in that building. As far as the saving the 2 million to put on the pool, I think that was out of context as well. That wasn't the discussion. The main point is we've been brainstorming, the steering committee, the library, personnel, the counselors. We've been trying to find a place, a safe and I don't know actually what you'd call it, but a proper place, I guess, to put the library. It needs to be done, and it needs to be done as soon as possible.
Other comments? Councillor Charlton?
Thank you. I think it just goes back to the fact that that lease is expiring in 13 months, and that this is a option to ensure that we have library services in the community. And the consequence of not securing a space like this will be a library. Not having a library, and then for how long? So I'm certainly not in favor of our community not having a library. And again, I would just say that I think this is a compromise.
I guess I would ask the question, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not, but were the selection committee, when this came back at the last meeting, were they in favor of this location?
It is a compromise. They definitely liked the Queen's Place location as well, but they understand the circumstances, and it is an open slate. They can develop it the way that they want to develop it, and they were very pleased about that.
Are there any other points? I'm just going to make a few points. Deputy Mayor Muse, would you take Deputy Mayor Muse? Used to be. Councillor Muse is most senior councillor. Would you take the chair?
Yes.
My comments are not going to be surprising either, because I truly believe when you invest money, you invest it for the future. Though we don't know what the future is, as was brought up. Right now, we look there and we see a call center and a professional building. Who knows, in 15 years, it could be a big youth center, it could be a whatever, I don't know. I really like sites that are active, that people go to, that they travel to. And I'm not certain how we've reached this point of where we are. We cannot build a new building in 13 months. Maybe we could order one in, I'm not sure. There has been no formal motion about building a pole. We are not committed to building a pole. We've never made a motion that says we are building a pole. So we don't need to have rumors that we're saving money from a library because it's going toward a pole. We've made motions respecting next steps toward that. We've never made motions about that, about building the pole. I guess I'm going to reserve my decision until we see an actual motion before us. But I do know as mayor that that's my duty to support the will of council. I appreciate libraries. If that happens to be the final home, then I believe we need to be very diligent in changing signage, promoting its location. But when it comes to engaging non-users, where it's going to be very isolated. It's in an isolated spot. But I think from what I've heard, that the majority of councillors are in favor of seeing this come forward on future agendas. I'm uncertain A, B, C, D, which of those things they want to proceed with, all or none. So to help staff, I think we need to have discussion on if it is the option to endorse the location next door. Then do you want all those things to move forward? The project management services, you want to do them one at a time, or do you want staff to decide those? However, it is in an entirely inappropriate location, but this is where we are. So, A, B, C, D. Staff need to know if they're coming forward with a recommendation or further discussion.
Go ahead, Council Mayor.
I would like to make a recommendation to move this to a motion for the next meeting, to endorse the Liverpool Business Development Center as the location for the new library, and for the staff to complete A, B, C, and D, or to work on A, B, C, and D.
Is there a second to the motion? Council Chapman? No, she did. Okay. I don't think we have to vote on it, do we? We do? Okay. All those in... Right? Discussion, yes. So,
I can see myself moving forward with accepting this if it came with the recommendation from the steering committee. If we had a meeting or something that came from the steering committee saying that they accepted this position and they supported this position, because that's the group that we empowered to pick this. So if something came from them as part of the recommendation, I could probably see myself getting behind it reluctantly.
is that something, Councillor Mary, you can bring back?
Well, I believe we had that actually in the notice that we put out by Ashley.
CEO, do you remember in the letter?
I think what Councillor Brown, if I could, I think what Councillor Brown's asking for is a motion, is for the library committee steering to actually have made a motion, and there was no, if the library committee minutes reflect that a motion was made, which I don't think they did, I don't think they took a motion. So Councillor Brown just is simply saying in order for him to endorse this, that he would like to have the library committee meet again, and that there be a motion from the committee endorsing the location, is what he's requesting, because there was no motion according to the report of the minutes.
And that is what we empowered the selection committee to come back with a recommendation to council for a location. So if they give us the recommendation for that, I would probably be supportive of this location.
Any more discussion on the motion that has been made here? Okay. Hearing none? Oh.
If I could, in the interest of recognizing that the current lease is up in 13 months, I think it would be helpful for staff to understand that if that doesn't happen, what does council want? Because with all due respect, we're running out of time. The only other thing that I would mention is that in reading the steering committee's terms of reference, their purpose was to provide municipal council with an educated, knowledgeable, and practical first-hand advice, education, and recommendation for design, layout, placement, programs, and services for the library. So they have done that. Council didn't accept it, and that's the nature of recommendations and advice, is sometimes you say no, and sometimes you say yes. So it would be helpful to understand what council's expectation would be if the committee did not provide that recommendation or endorsement, for lack of a better way of putting it.
I think because this is a time-sensitive issue, we should move forward with this. There were no other viable options for space for a library within existing buildings. And, you know, there's recommendations that come forward from PAC all the time, and sometimes they're not supported. Most recently one 2 or 3 weeks ago at a council meeting. So I think we should move forward with this so that we can ensure we have library services.
Yes, I've received a lot of correspondence, a lot of comments concerning the library, and some this evening also. My recommendation is to proceed with the site that we have at the call center, and move. We have to move quickly, and I think time is of the essence, and I agree with the call center.
Any more discussion on this motion? Okay, call for question. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried.
Request for funding for New Year's Eve levy. So the New Year's Day levy, this is New Year's Day levy, that is held at the Royal Branch Legion in Liverpool, is actually a joint effort between the Region of Queens and the Mersey Branch, which is why we co-fund this. This started many years ago with Mayor Leaf, who felt the council should have a levy, and there was already one going on, so we teamed up with Mersey Branch. So that's why generally councillors show up at that levy and things. So there is it is up for discussion. Is there anyone who disapproves of contributing toward half the cost of the New Year's Day levy, which is always well attended? Councillor Muse?
I make a motion that the usual request of 50% cost sharing is being requested for $750.
Yeah, that has to go to next for recommendation at our next council meeting. It gives them plenty of time. Okay, everyone in favor of that? Yes? Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of good news. On On the Utility and Review Board decision, Ms. Fino received this great news, and staff's already been working on this because we had given direction by motion. So this is simply here just for information. So the good news is, to those people who do not have agendas in the viewing world, Ms. Vino is.
So we got our decision from the UARB, and good news on two levels. Level one, they are recommending, or they are allowing us to do the credit that council had requested. And the second part of the decision, that was response to the complaints that they received from the public, and I'm going to read a section of the letter. Based on the information provided, I find that the utilities' response to the power surge, over which they had no control, was reasonable. I also approve the reduction rates for the most recent quarter. I agree that using a previously unused reserve to cover the reduction in revenue is prudent. And specifically regarding section 52, I note that reasonableness is a key part of this provision. The boil water advisory was a reasonable response to a situation that was beyond the control of the utility. I can think of no other response that would have ensured the safety of the drinking water. In my opinion, the utility complies with section 52 of the Act. And the copy of the letter is included with my staff report. So, yay.
So the next billing has already, the meters have already been read in all of the Liverpool area, and I think Brooklyn have been read now, or in the process of being read.
They were completed today.
They're all
Thank you, Director
completed.
Grant. So the utility clerk is in the middle of preparing the bills that will go out first thing in they'll be dated January. They'll go out, I think, shortly before Christmas. And I will be filing a revised set of rates. So I have to do a revised set of rates for the billing period that just ended. Then I have to refile a set of rates for the next billing period, which brings our consumption rate back up to the $1.24 from the 37-cent reduction. So that will all be done. It has to be done by the end of day on the 30th, but that's, we're good to go. We're good there.
Perfect.
I would just like to thank staff for this. This was obviously difficult for everyone involved, and I think it's just important to note, it states in this package as well that in its response to the customer complaints, the utility indicated that staff are preparing a communication strategy to address the concerns raised by customers and council. The strategy will be reviewed by staff and council because I think, as always, we always have room for improvement. So just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Any other questions? And road levy bylaw update. So this sort of got mixed up with the last one as well. So we can make it a little shorter. But there's still some different things, because this talks about some public consultation and doing some meetings with, I'm assuming, different private road associations, or?
Thank you, Mayor Norman. Yes, this has been an ongoing discussion, and as we did mention earlier, this bylaw will be written based on what we've seen with the Greater Milliga Lake Landowners Association, but council needs to realize that this bylaw will apply to everybody in the region. And so when we had our new CAO join the discussion, we had a meeting with representatives from the Greater Milliga Lake Landowners Association, and we discussed timing because there were some concerns around public engagement and when was the right time to do it. I have the details of the things that we've talked about so far. The public engagement question is something that council will have to discuss, whether we do both or just one. The consultation surrounding the bylaw in a region as a whole, and then another public consultation meeting when the actual associations come and say we would like the road levy. And that, because they're geographically, these associations may be in different parts of Queens, that it may be necessary, or maybe to council's comfort level, to have different meetings when each association has come to ask for the levy. I mean, that's basically everything that we have discussed. We've already talked about the reporting standards, which are very strict, and they are not included in this package. We've already spent $5,600, but in legal fees, there has been none. Sorry, tired. There's been no legal fees billed so far this fiscal year, and we have incurred significant fees. So that $5,667 does not represent the cost to us. I don't know if council has any questions. I guess we're a staff. We're just looking for direction and to make sure council is comfortable moving forward. I know that the last time I came to council, it was just to receive direction. Should we move forward with drafting the bylaw? And council was in agreement that that be the case. Now we're at the point where the bylaw is actually drafted. I'm comfortable with it. It's been reviewed by our legal team. I believe our new CAO is comfortable with it. Now it's just a question of what is right, what is the right thing to do for council in terms of the public engagement process. And that's something that council needs to decide. So I guess I would like you to reassure me that you are okay with us moving forward, and then perhaps talk about what your level of comfort is with the discussions and the public engagement that would be what you may want moving forward.
Director Vino, I find it difficult to comment on a bylaw of which I've never seen. So that's a question. But we did direct staff to move forward. Most of the people in the Maliga Lake Lot Owners Association are seasonals. So public consultation, would we do that electronically, like Zoom meeting? Does the Maliga Lake Lot Owners Association have email contact for them? Or do we have to wait until next summer to do, because if we do it physically, we're only going to get the handful of people that live there year round, and they're probably less than 10% of the people who own land there.
If we're speaking specifically about the Greater Maliga Lake Landowners Association, I know that they have said they usually get between 50 and 60 members at their meetings, whereas they have 1,200 members. And you're right, Mayor Norman, I'm not sure that the majority are not residents or seasonal residents. That's certainly a challenge that would have to be overcome, especially with the non-resident, Canadian residents who would own property there. I think if there was going to be some kind of public engagement, there would absolutely have to be at least some component of it would be virtual, so that all of those people could participate. The challenge would be how best to reach out to all of those people, and we would have to reach out to the associations to see if they had contacts that way. I don't think that being a challenge should be a deterrent or anything. If council wishes, staff will figure it out, the best way to move forward to get as much participation in any public engagement as we could.
Yeah, I think for us, at least for me anyway, I was wondering, does council want to engage the public on this topic? And if so, before the bylaw is adopted, or before or during the consideration of an individual association's approval of such a thing? I think that's sort of the question, and then we can come back with a more comprehensive, like what our plan would be, and probably involves mailing the property owners, I would think, in the catchment area. But anyway, those are the kinds of questions we could use some help and indication on.
Thanks. So if we looked at it and compared it to our land use bylaw process, there would have been draft documents, there would have been community meetings in several areas through Queens to allow everyone an opportunity to come out. There was also virtual, at least one virtual session, maybe two, I can't recall specifically. Director McLeod would be able to note that. But if we looked at it like that, if you put it in a draft process, then people will be able to give feedback, and then I think council would likely have a better comfort level moving forward and then putting it out, because you still have to go through like the advertising process and things like that. So in my mind, that makes sense. Not sure how other people feel.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think, I almost forgot what I was gonna say. I guess I'm tired too. Yeah, I think we need to have public input on this. Like, you know, people are gonna wonder what's going on. I think we have to make it clear to the general public in Queens County that we're not forcing everybody in the county to pay a road rate. This is only for people who live on private roads, who have signed documents when they bought their land that they would be members of that lot owners association, or, you know, if each one has covenants, they joined up, they know that they have to pay road maintenance fees. This is a way for them to collect. Greater Maliga, we use them as an example, but they're a sizable portion of our county. I think we've got something like 6,000 residences in Queens County. That number sticks in my head. Greater Maliga has 650, so they're 10% of the residences in the county, and they're all living on private roads. So we're paying taxes. We're also paying to maintain the roads we're on. But I think we need to have public input, and I think we have to have some kind of public engagement when we develop the bylaw, and I think we have to have public engagement on each group that wants to join, because they're going to be in wide geographic areas of the county. So I think before a group can join, they have to have a public meeting. You know, that's my feeling, that, you know, the members have to be informed, they have to have a vote. And I know with our association, over the last 2 AGMs, it's, you know, the newsletter has gone out, they have a mailing list for everybody who gets their association dues. They have a lot owners mailing list, so that's been a part of it that goes out every year, and they have a annual meeting, and that's online. So the last one we had was 65, 70 people, but they were from 3 continents. So, you know, we covered people from North America, South America, Europe, and Asia during that. So, you know, having it online is going to allow people who may be here at the time. Having it in the summer, we've tried meetings in the past. We had them in the summer, we had them in the winter, we had them in Queens County, we had them in Halifax. The numbers didn't change much. You know, engagement is hard in every organization, but I think we try to do what we can, we do the best we can, but we definitely have to have that public engagement. And every group has to go by what their bylaws allow them to do. You know, each group is different, so they have to be taken on those, whether their directors have the right to enter them into that or not. You know, all those things have to be taken into consideration.
So to CAO Joudry's question, if we're going to have public engagement prior, you know, for the draft bylaw, where do we have it? Definitely in the North Queens area, definitely in the Greenfield area. There's private roads through North Queens. There's private roads. Do we have them in communities with private roads, like down toward Eastport's got private roads? I'm not sure if they have road associations though, which you have to have. So how does council want to have them? How many? Who goes? Staff go? What do they do? Is it a good use of time? That's the questions. Where are they going to be held? Do you have one in West Queens? Eastport? Liverpool? Are there private roads here? Not really.
I would recommend Greenfield and Port Medway. I mean, they're fairly central to the largest groups. I know there's people outside. There's probably groups in Port Mattoon area, Port Jolly area that have lot owners associations, but some of the bigger ones are around Port Medway, East Port Medway, and out in Greenfield, LaBelle area. So that would be my recommendation, to have one in each one, the same as we did when we had the land use bylaw, because this is going to be a bylaw that covers the whole county. And any group that forms an association at a later date will be under that, so people should know in every area.
Councillor Honksback, Tupper Lake Road, is that public, private? Is there a lot of private there? Caledonia, Greenfield, Eastport has a small community hall.
What about White Point
White Point?
Estates?
No, I believe that's all. Someone's got a little bit of past experience. I don't think that's road association. I think that's private. Yeah, that's private. Yeah. So, but what about down the Woods Harbor Road? It has to be nonprofit. Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering, can these meetings be live streamed as well, so that the other members would be able to chime in on them, or?
Sorry, can you, Councillor Miro, clarify your question? Sorry, which members? You want it so that sort of members of the public could join a virtually somehow and participate? Yeah, for sure. So, on that note, I'm gonna just try to take a stab at recapping and see if I've got this right. Council is generally in favor of the bylaw. They probably like to see it first. If that looks good, we'll come back with or maybe at the same time come back with a bit of a plan on how we would engage the public and what those mechanisms would be, sort of lay that out, recognizing that work at best would commence sometime in the winter sort of timing. Have I got that right? Okay. And generally, council is in favor of the idea of there being public engagement around before the adoption of the bylaw. But I haven't heard a whole lot about still having the association and us doing some kind of public engagement at the time of potential adoption for a particular road. So let me clarify the question. So if you do public engagement now before you adopt the bylaw, then my question, and we'll take Maliga as an example, would you want to do engagement in Maliga specific to that association, or is the public engagement prior to the bylaw adoption sufficient for your comfort level? Am I clear in my question? Okay.
Would not the bylaw have statements in it respecting that if a road association applies, that they have to have a public meeting?
Yeah.
Or just results or proven vote from an AGM or a public meeting, because if you've got 1,200 members and only 60 show up at a meeting, that's not a very good state, so what's in the draft bylaw now? Do they have to have a public meeting, or do they simply have to have a vote that comes at a majority at an annual meeting?
Game of mics. In the bylaws at the current draft, which of course is a draft, the associations have to have a meeting where they've engaged their membership. The concern, I guess, is that some of the members don't attend these meetings, or some of the property owners who will see these additions on their tax bill don't attend these meetings. But then they're going to get their tax bill and there's going to be a charge on there for a road levy. So that would be the difference. I would think that council would distinguish the region of Queens is going to have a public engagement session versus the membership of Association A is going to vote at their AGM to adopt the road levy process through the tax billing system.
So my question is, how do we ensure that people are going to come to our meeting who aren't going to go to the road association meeting? Are we going to direct mail to everyone on private roads and say the region of Queens might very well be collecting your road levies? Please attend the meeting, because if only if only a small percent go to their own meeting, and we know how many people come to our meeting, I would think the road, so unless we direct direct mail to, like if it's Malaga Lot or these private road owners, we would have to direct mail to them. It's the only way we have found out that we can communicate is through direct mail if we want people to actually read something. So I don't see the difference between us holding a meeting or the association of which people are members holding a meeting. But I think but people will be very surprised when they get their tax bill, and especially people that haven't been paying their dues.
If I may, and I think that's exactly my concern, is all of a sudden we're going to get as staff overwhelmed with people calling and saying, what's up with that, which is fair. I mean, we haven't sat down and discussed it as a team yet, but I would strongly recommend that if this is the approach we're taking, before an association's road levy is adopted, the municipality, as the one collecting the money, actually does direct mail and provide notice that there's a meeting. The other reason I would say that is I think all the associations will tell us that their ability to understand exactly who owns every property and how to get a hold of that person is limited, where we do have that tax roll information. And then the other thing I would say is, as a government, when we mail, it's, I don't know if everyone knows this, but it actually circumvents the no junk mail rule. So Canada Post will actually deliver mail from governments, where if you say no junk mail, an association's mail may not be received. So, and again, fundamentally, as the government collecting the money, I think it's incumbent upon us to be the ones to check in with your property owners first. But, anyway.
So 12,000 members, $12,000 for postal. 1,200. Okay, I thought you said 1,200. Okay, I'm just thinking of the cost, because we had originally said that the Malaga Lake Lot Owners Association was going to be responsible for all the costs incurred in the development of the bylaw. Did we not?
No, that is incorrect.
What did we, because I thought that was part of that original plan.
There is a $10,000 fee that they will be paying, and then if that is in the draft as it currently exists, in the agreement with the Greater Malaga Lake Lotto Association as it currently exists. And so the associations that apply subsequent to them will pay a $2,500 fee, which will be then reimbursed to the Greater Malaga Lake Land Owners Association. In terms of communication, I think that there, as I said, it's a very challenging group. I think there needs to be recognition that it doesn't matter how much you communicate, no matter what, you're always going to get people that say, I didn't know. So you have to just approach it with everything you know to be true and your best, and use your best approach. I know that I've talked to Director McLeod about how easy is it for us to get a list of every PID that's on a private road. It is not easy. It's going to take someone, an individual person, looking at those roads and writing down those PIDs. So it can be done, but it's going to take a lot of staff time. And so one of the things that we'll be brainstorming as a team is how best to do this, knowing that we'll do the absolute best we possibly can, the cost-effective choice, but also knowing that you're always going to get people that say, I didn't know. And that's okay, because that's communication.
So I have a question about picking out the names and numbers. I know when we were talking about some of the earlier drafts that the association is responsible each year to giving us a list of the PIDs with the fee that they're charging. Would them giving us a list of the PIDs allow us to pull those numbers out for direct mailing? Would that make it any easier?
Yes, they're going to give us the assessment numbers, but someone's still going to sit at the computer and put those in and pull it up and then write it down. It's not something that we can just put in SAP like a list and spit it out. Now, one of the questions I'll be asking SAP is that possible? But when we're looking at an association coming in and just applying, at that time, they're not going to provide us with the assessment numbers that they're looking at. That doesn't come till council has accepted their application and is moving ahead with the implementation of that on the billing system. It's because there may be changes between the time that their application is accepted and the time that our tax billing system goes out, if it makes any sense.
But there's options staff can look at for doing that. I mean, there must be students taking computer work at community college that we could, you know, hire for some, whatever. I'm sure you can think of ways, rather than overload existing staff, to be creative and do some temporary contract out work for that type of data collection.
Once we brainstorm, we isolate really what we need, and we brainstorm how to get it. You know, staff will do the best they absolutely can and explore options like that. We're really good at thinking outside the box, and knowing that what we do for the first association needs to be replicated. Like, we have to make a process that we know can we use to any subsequent applications. Now, some of the subsequent applications may be 12 houses, so it's not an issue. But it needs to be a process that we're all comfortable with going forward. And when I say we, I mean council.
Any other comments? So, CAO Jodrey, have you got enough direction? Do you and Director Vino comfortable knowing council's opinions?
I just want to thank the staff that have taken part in this, because I know there's a lot of moving parts, and we've gone through 3 CAOs during the process. So it's been like a relay race where the baton's been handed off from one to the other, and it's still going on. So I appreciate it.
As there are no in-camera items, the meeting is adjourned.